What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Eagles post-game report. I'm Alex Miller from the Eagle, joined by Robert Cessna and Travis Brown. We are here. It is very late at night, and we are putting to bed Texas A&M's just something of a season. 7-6, capped by a 31-23 loss to Oklahoma State. Look, A&M was playing with a depleted, ragtag, whatever you want to call it, team tonight. They had, 55-something scholarship players, and it showed. And somehow, some way, A&M almost had a chance to send it to overtime at the end of the game. Yeah,
I'll tell you what, if Daniels doesn't fumble early in the fourth quarter, it'd be interesting to see how much momentum would have played, because I thought Oklahoma State was reeling a little bit at that point. It was pressing.
Yeah, 31 players on roster that weren't at the game today, and then the first play of the game, A&M loses Jalen Henderson, who had seemed to be a very formidable quarterback for them as their third-string quarterback of the season. He goes down and gets hurt in that first play with a pretty scary injury on his non-throwing arm, and Marcel Reed, the true freshman, comes up, and I couldn't point to any real part of the offense that was he had his fingers on to say that was any part of the problem. He led that offense great. He had 361 total yards, which was bested only by Connor Wegman's 399 against Louisiana Monroe earlier this season. He did a great job for the stage and what he was called to do in this game. Just that fumble and just a few field goals instead of touchdowns early in the game turned out to be the difference.
Yeah, I mean, you think about those two early field goals, that's 8 points left on the board. That's the difference in the game. You talk about the fumble. I mean, A&M had it right there. I mean, Oklahoma State, give them credit, though, they were clearly the better team, and it showed at the end of the night.
Well, yeah, at first it was a 24-6 at halftime, and I thought, man, this is going to be a blowout, because that was like A&M's largest deficit at halftime in a long time. But I was wrong. I thought, when Henderson goes down, I said, this game's really going to get ugly. But I do have to give it to A&M. Even as bad as the defense was, you could see a couple young linemen, you could see a couple young defensive backs. They got some playing time, which will help moving forward. And I think this is something that Elko can build on. I mean, it was positive. It wasn't all negative. I thought this could be a real negative game.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what A&M had available to them, and especially after that first half, all signs indicated pointing towards a blowout. I mean, the positions that they were so depleted in, 3 scholarship wide receivers out there playing, you're missing one of your best tight ends, you're missing both your cornerbacks, you're missing a safety, a linebacker, almost all of your defensive line, and they were able to hold serve pretty much for at least most of the second half with the Big 12 runner-up. It was an impressive effort to come down to the wire, to be able to have a shot at tying it up late in the game. My biggest question coming out of this is there's still about a week, half a week left in this winter transfer portal. There's still the spring transfer portal, and A&M has 2 quarterbacks that now have tape that proves that they can play at the Power 5 level and they can really sling the ball around. Does A&M hold on to both of them going into next season? Because both of them are certainly, if they do have the performances they had in these last 4 games, are certainly capable backups to Connor Wegman. What's that situation going to look like? Because they do have good tape out there now that other coaches around the country can see.
Well, and to your point on Reed, it really seemed like he settled in a lot in the third quarter, and that's when the offense really started to become unstoppable. Sans the fumble at the 1-yard line, I think they scored on every drive of the second half. Well, I guess they had a 3-and-out, but the point was they were pretty unstoppable. Something we talked about, though, in the second quarter, though, Travis, was A&M was putting together some good drives. It just didn't seem like they were calling plays that gave Marcel some manageable throws. They were trying to take too many deep shots when, they could have had a guy, but, when you just needed 6 or 7 yards, they were trying to go for 30 or 40 instead.
Well, and Marcel had a streak there in the second quarter where he had 4 straight completions. 2 of them were to Max Wright, and that was capped off with that spectacular one-handed catch by Moose Muhammad. They just couldn't connect once they were getting into Oklahoma State territory. They just couldn't connect to get that one last little push to get them close enough to get into the red zone and scoring range. But it's hard to put much fault on the offense in this game. They put up points, and they mostly did their job, all things considered. It was the defense that was really shaky, especially the defensive secondary against an old man, a geriatric of a quarterback in Alan Bowman, and two wide receivers who put up over 150 yards. It was just hard to come back from that.
You know, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised that it was as close as it was, though, Cease, because I think Oklahoma State has been in our prog picks several times this year, and I mean, they have messed me up this whole year. You know, you told me at the beginning of the year, there's going to be a team that gets you week in and week out. Oklahoma State was that team for me. I mean, Big 12 runner-up, they get blown out by UCF. They barely scrape away with a win over just a depleted A&M team tonight.
Yeah, well, you look at Oklahoma State, their defense was really ripped by Texas. Now you can say they were really ripped by A&M because you don't know what kind of packages they had for Reed, since they probably had less than 15 practices with Henderson. So I feel they did a pretty good job on the fly. So you have to temper that a little bit. If I was Oklahoma State, I know they have all their offensive players back. I'd be a little bit scared about that defense with new people coming into Big 12, because what Texas has done and A&M's going to do, and I get it. I think one thing that I will take from this, you're in an era where you might have to win some 31-30 games, and I don't think A&M was built for that, but now maybe moving forward, I think Elko's going to see you got to win a game like this. You got to get to 32, and they weren't able to get to 32. Once again, I thought there was a lot of positives, but it's just overall just a pretty bad season. The bottom is, I don't think any of us are sad that we're walking out. There's no more games to cover this year.
Right. What Alex, what you wrote about too, the other interesting story that's a nice end cap to a long journey is that of Sam Matthews, the 12th man. He's able to get out there, get a start, play safety the entire game, leads the team in tackles, gets an interception. He is from Houston, said he grew up as a Texans fan, and getting to do all that on this stage, pretty special moment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, getting to talk with Sam Matthews over the last year or so, getting to hear his story, I mean, he is the epitome of what a 12th man is, right? And for him, there were 6 guys on that defense that made their first career starts tonight. And several of them are freshmen, they'll be back. But a guy like him, a guy like Kent Robinson, both walk-ons, I mean, when are they ever going to get another opportunity like that against a team like Oklahoma State? And so, they were hungry, they got beat, but they got back off the mat and kept fighting. And, in the second half, they started clamping down on Oklahoma State a little bit, and that's how they were able to make it interesting. But yeah, Travis, I mean, what a story, but, as I wrote in there, no fairy tale ending for these guys tonight. Just a valiant effort that you can hang your head high on.
One more good point, too, and the fact of the matter is that A&M had a guy in James Coley calling the offense who hasn't done that in a long time. He was called into action just for this game. While there was some instances of probably trying to take too many shots with Marcel Reed early, I thought he called a great game in the second half, especially with some of those screen plays. I mean, the one that sticks out is that Amari Daniels fumble play. They brought the house, and it was a great call to dump it off to Daniels. Should have been a touchdown if not for the fumble there late. Cease, what do you think? And kind of your coaching grades in this one as well, because it was a pretty ragtag coaching group, but I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I gave the coaches a real high grade because you consider there's only 2 penalties in the whole game. You've been off all this time. You got this hodgepodge. A&M only had 2 penalties with all those hodgepodge of players or whatever. And I think I give Cooley great credit for the way he called. And I know he had to get some help from Jim Chaney. Jim Chaney's historically been a pretty good play caller. And once again, I think sometimes we don't know what Reed was supposed to do. So maybe he's supposed to check it down, but he got so excited, and you can't get too mad at a guy when you've nobody backing him up. So it's hard to say. I think once again is you got to take the positives, which you guys, there was a lot of positives out of this, and I didn't think we would have many positives when Jalen Henderson was coming off with that cast or whatever on his right arm. I thought, oh man, we're going to be writing a lot of boo-hoo stuff.
Cease, let's close it out with this. What was the what would you think was the most impactful, biggest storyline thing that you'll take the most from this season?
Well, just the fact that, once again, is that they made changes in offense, and it really was the same offense that we saw over and over, and A&M just kept repeating the same mistakes. I don't care what you do in life, if you keep making the same mistakes, you got to change. I don't care what your business is, and I think, once again, we've seen Jimbo's team 3 years in a row basically do the same thing. They just didn't improve, and whether it was special teams, whether it was the secondary, whether it was the offensive line, they just didn't fix mistakes. And you can say they did the same. They kept me for 4 or 5 decades. They got to correct the mistakes.
Well, what about you?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of Aggies would agree that watching A&M football is the definition of insanity. You could probably attest to that, having watched many of those yourself, Cease. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest storyline is, you know, A&M had a lot of hope coming into this season, I think, and they clearly could not get over that hump that they hoped to get because, like you said, Cease, they couldn't get out of their own way, right? I mean, I think it was very apparent that the stubbornness of Jimbo's reluctance to change things ultimately spelled the end of it, and, you know, they made a change, and A&M's moving forward. I think you wrote in your column that, you know, this wasn't the end of the 2023 season, it's the start of the 2024 season, and as you said, if you're Mike Elko sitting up in the suites tonight, you know, yeah, you had a pretty interesting group of guys, but a lot of those guys are going to be back next year, and I think there are a lot of bright spots. You think about a guy like Torian York that has really shown this season that he's kind of was a hidden gem out there in Temple. You know, you're able to get a guy like Chase Basantis back. They're going to get Micah Tease. Ruben Owens was out there tonight. I mean, I know Marcel Reed played well, but Connor Wegman looked pretty good those first 3 or 4 games when he was out there. So, you know, A&M's got a lot of work to do, but there is a glimmer of optimism. But I think a lot of Aggies are going to be pretty cautious moving forward until the proof is in the pudding. You know what I'm saying?
To me, it goes back to a quote that Ross Bjork had with another local outlet right after they fired Jimbo Fisher, and they said that because of what they did in paying that historical buyout to fire Jimbo Fisher when they did, Texas A&M isn't an 8-5 job anymore, or if you look at this season, a 7-6 job anymore. There's a magnitude that goes with that decision, and that falls right on the shoulders of Mike Elko and his next staff. And that's a tough spot to be in when you look at what Texas A&M threw out there with the transfer portal, with opt-outs, with the NFL draft, with injuries and everything like that. As a start to moving on to that, it's going to be an interesting next few years, and especially next year, because from what looks to be a pretty from the ground up rebuild, there's also a lot of weight and pressure put on it as well because of that, and it's going to be an interesting era for A&M football moving on from Jimbo Fisher. And I think this was put a period on the end of that Jimbo Fisher era in this game, but it also was a start to what's to come next, and that's going to be a big question mark.
All right, it's really late at night. Everybody that's watching this video is probably asleep while we're recording this, so glad y'all are watching this Thursday morning. We're going to try and drive home to College Station. Pray for us to get home safe. Be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our coverage on A&M football. Hey, we'll be back soon talking the Mike Elko era as A&M looks to turn a chapter in its history. Thanks for reading and watching, y'all.